Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of How is the Alberta Government Screwing Over People with Disabilities. On today's episode, I want to talk about the ADAPT program. ADAPT is the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, and it was announced last Tuesday by the United Conservative Government in a media release that was abrupt and short-sighted and honestly incredibly tone-deaf. The way that they did this caused panic, and is still causing panic and worry and concern for about 77,000 Albertans with disabilities. Now, before I tell you about ADAPT, I need to tell you about ACE. So ACE, or Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped, is a financial assistance program for people with disabilities in Alberta. And $1,902 is the maximum benefit that you can take home. Now, for some people on ACE, the $1,902 is all that they are able to live on. They aren't able to work. And that is due to a multitude of barriers, including the lack of an accessibility legislation, and Alberta is actually one of the last provinces to have an accessibility legislation. And that essentially means that businesses and companies are not mandated to be more accessible. And so, for some people with disabilities, it's not that they don't want to work, it's that the jobs out there are literally not accessible for them. So the $1,902 is what they have to live on, and frankly, it's not enough. But that's a whole nother video. For people who can work on ACE, they are able to make up to $1,950 before their ACE is clawed back. So that brings us back to the ADAPT program, Alberta Disability Assistance Program. Now, this program aims to allow people with disabilities who can work to bring home more of their money and not have their monthly financial allowance clawed back as severely as they would on ACE. Now, on the face, that sounds like a pretty good program. And actually, when I first heard about this program, I thought, that's awesome. That is fantastic. Until somebody said to me, the problem with that is there's no mention of what the monetary amount on ADAPT would be. And there's actually another program. It is the Barriers from Employment program. And the monetary amount of that is about $800 a month. So it's more than $1,000 less than what somebody would make on ACE. So what that essentially means is, if I had a job and I was on the ADAPT program and I got laid off from that job, all that I would be making is that $800. I would be making less than when I was on ACE, which already, again, isn't enough. The other problem is that the government has allowed themselves the ability to look at the files of 77,000 people on ACE and determine who's going to go to the ADAPT program and who's going to stay on the ACE program. And there will apparently be assessments by medical professionals. Of course, there's no mention of what that means. So they've made it so that they can do this, which means that somebody who needs to be on ACE because of barriers to employment, and barriers to employment can be anything. it doesn't just mean physical barriers or language barriers. It can mean that the structure of employment as it is right now is not built for some people with disabilities. Because I am a firm believer, and I've had people get mad at me for this. I'm sure somebody in the comments will get mad at me. But I am a firm believer that every single person with a disability, every single human being, has value, has skill that they can bring to a job, and things that they can offer a business or a company. The problem is that the businesses and the companies are not set up for people who maybe need to work certain hours, or to maybe only work for an hour, or, have chronic fatigue or chronic illness where they need more flexibility in the work they do and how they do that work. So, by giving themselves this power, the government is basically saying, we don't care that the accessibility isn't there. We're going to move these people off of ACE onto a DAP with no certainty that they will find a job. And without knowing how much a DAP will be, and considering the fact that they didn't just think, oh, let's just increase ACE, I highly doubt that the amount of a DAP is going to be the same or more than ACE. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of worry, and people are rightfully scared and rightfully concerned about what this means. This government has proven many times in the last 3 weeks, and actually since they've been in government, that they don't care about people with disabilities. And the way in which they did this, the way that they did it while people were still processing the fact that disability advocacy groups had lost their funding, it's almost like they hoped that people would still be so upset and worried and frightened about the disability advocacy group losing their funding that they wouldn't notice that this happened. That, their mind wouldn't have time to process this, and so it would just kind of slide by, and they could do this. I almost forgot, by the way, they did say that they consulted the disability community. However, Health Advocacy Federation, Disability Action Hall, Health Region Health Advocacy Network, Southern Alberta Individualized Planning Association, Scope Society, Albertans Advocating for Change Together, never got a phone call, never got an email, would never ask if the government could come and have a chat about this. Even the Premier's Council on the Status of Person with Disabilities in Alberta was surprised by this. And considering that they're an advisory group to the minister, that is saying something. But yeah, basically, the government is giving themselves the authority to play with the livelihood of 77,000 Albertans with disabilities before they've made any kind of accessibility legislation, broken down any barriers to employment, and, consulted with the actual community on this. And if that bothers you, or concerns you, or angers you, or worries you, I would encourage you to write a letter to your MLA, Minister Nixon, Danielle Smith. I feel like that's been my spiel for the last month, but, this government keeps wanting to attack our community,